Hi, and thanks for joining us for AWS's Migrate and Modernise webinar with Covermore to discuss their DC exit migration and transformation journey. Covermore is a global travel insurer that is part of the Zurich Insurance Group and was founded in Sydney in 1986 and has grown to more than 2,000 employees in 21 countries across 5 continents, and it's become one of the world's leading travel insurance, medical assistance and employee assistance provider. Today we'll hear from a panel in a fireside chat about how Covermore was able to exit its data centre in less than 6 months and address its immediate challenges of ageing infrastructure and related security risks, removing technical debt, and improving agility. We'll also gain insights on how Covermore used this compelling event to be more than just a technical migration, but to also accelerate its digital transformation journey and drive innovation. This will be followed by a technical discussion with the AWS architecture team to discuss how Covermore partnered with AWS ProServe and AWS Managed Services, also known as AMS, to achieve its business outcomes. My name's Michelle Ng, and I'll be hosting today's fireside chat. I'm part of AWS's professional services team, working as a migrations practice manager, specialising in large-scale migration and modernisation delivery. I've been with AWS for almost 3 years and have helped enterprise customers across FSI, higher education and public sector, and retail industries to migrate to AWS with the support of our partners. I'm joined in today's fireside chat with our special guest, Neil Maclure, Global Head of Cloud Infrastructure and Technology Services at Covermore, Sean Godfrey, and AJ Curtis. Thank you to the panel for joining us to share your insights with our audience of technical and business decision makers and also our migration community who may be embarking on their own migration journey. Not everyone may know Covermore's history and why it's different. To start with providing context for the audience, Neil, can you please provide an overview of the business and your role on the Covermore DC exit migration program?
Thank you, Michelle, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present Covermore's story right through this migration. My name is Neil. As you mentioned, I look after a global portfolio of cloud infrastructure and technology services. Covermore, for our audience that don't know it, we specialize in travel insurance. We are born as a company in Sydney in 1986. And since then, we've basically grown exponentially. And we are across 15 different countries, predominantly in EMEA, LATAM, and the APAC region as well. My role, particularly in the migration, is I'm the exec sponsor for the migration to begin with. And I see myself as the sort of an unblocker of anything that basically prevents us from moving forward and executing on our strategy. In terms of my day basically spans from 60% of my day is tactically talking to various different teams, working out issues at a tactical level, and the other 40% is sitting in front of my ELT and explaining exactly where things are at and where we're going and what are some of the issues we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So that's pretty much my role in Covermore, and it's been an interesting journey so far. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Neil. Your role as an executive sponsor is such a critical component of a transformation program for unblocking those issues and being that single-threaded leader. I might switch to AJ, just to understand your role on Covermore's migration program.
Yeah, cool. So I guess, as a solution architect working at AWS, I guess, the things I like to try to do is really understand the why, right? And, I kind of sat with Neil's team, both Neil's team and his broader executive team, to really understand some of the business outcomes that they were trying to achieve. And after kind of conducting those interviews and really trying to understand, where they're going, I would then kind of try and relate that into like a technical architecture, right? And so not only was this part of like a DC migration, but I also wanted to get Covermore to think about it in the larger sense of what could the future for Covermore be. So, okay, cool. So now you know a bit about my role, and Neil, you and I have worked closely over the last couple of years, right? And so could you maybe tell everyone, what was the need for this migration, or what was what brought about the need for this migration out of your data center?
Absolutely, AJ, and it feels like we've been talking about this for a while now.
Yep,
And,
we have.
but for the audience, we to begin with, our primary purpose of undertaking this transformation was that we had a compelling event. And that compelling event was we were given 6 months to exit our data centers. It was an immovable date and it was a stretch date. But where it basically made sense for us, we used the compelling event to position a transformative program. So number one, we had a compelling event, and that was the key driver. But on the back of that compelling event, we had other reasons that made sense for us to basically go to the cloud and whatnot. And the other one was scalability. We as a business, we were unable to scale rapidly in various geographies and whatnot. So we knew the on-prem infrastructure that we had literally tied us down to us being able to innovate and scale and grow and as a company mature to that next level. So that was the second issue that we had, that was the second issue that we had to deal with. The third piece of the puzzle was from a DR and a BCP perspective. The pandemic brought home, it became all too real for us that we needed to have a solid DR and a BCP strategy. And we knew that being on an on-prem infrastructure, again, it basically acted as a blocker for us in achieving that. So by moving to the cloud, we knew that straight away, from a DR and BCP perspective, all of those issues effectively get mitigated.
Yep.
And lastly, for us, we did want, because CoverMore is growing so rapidly in various geographies, our target operating model, having data centers, having our infrastructure tied down to data centers, definitely was not really the way to go when you wanted to, roll out a target operating model globally and have one way of working and so on. So going into the cloud, going in with AWS cloud, it simply made sense because straight away it acted as an enabler for our target operating model as well, AJ.
Yep, awesome. Thanks, Neil. That's awesome.
Thanks for sharing that, Neil. Having that compelling event, such as a DC exit and the other common drivers such as resiliency and scalability, they're quite typical of migration programs. I'll switch now to introduce Sean. Can you tell us a bit about your role and how you were involved in the CoverMore program?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Michelle. So I've been fortunate enough to work with Neil and the team for CoverMore over the last 2 years. And during that time, it really gave me an opportunity to get a good understanding of their business goals and objectives, some of the challenges they faced as an organisation, particularly around COVID, and some of the constraints they operate in as a business. And over that time, it became quite clear in order to execute across their business strategy, one of the first things they needed to do was to kind of move some of their core systems out of the Sydney data centre into the AWS cloud. The reason this was important was because it really gave them the platform to get the business agility, to get the speed, and to innovate that CoverMore was looking for. And the other factor that we had to consider is obviously cost. And from a financial point of view, it had to make sense for CoverMore, and we also needed to be flexible on the timing of when we were going to migrate. So over a period of about 6 months, we worked closely with Neil and with the account team, the AWS account team, and with our cloud economics team to really analyse the workloads or the applications running at CoverMore and to help them develop a business case that made sense. And so that when this compelling event did occur, that Neil mentioned, we were ready to go. So Neil, from your perspective, when you look at the migration strategy and the partnering approach, what were some of those key factors that helped you make that decision?
Thank you, Sean. And again, lovely working with you right through careers. And you definitely did bring the magic sauce to this transformation. So thank you so much. So from our perspective, I suppose, apart from cost, which is on everybody's mind when you embark on a transformation program of this size, we had top of mind risk as one of the pillars. So if you like, risk, strategy, and speed. These were some of the three charters, if you like, the three pieces of the charter we had to execute. When we decided to look at these three pieces of the charter, from a risk perspective, straight away, we needed a hyperscaler that basically understood our business, And that became very evident when AWS helped us with our EMEA migration. Again, we had 4 months to build out a performant platform in region remotely during a pandemic. And as a partner, AWS jumped straight in and literally stood beside us in executing and operationalizing a platform all remotely. And that would not have been possible without you understanding our business, understanding the risk, our risk appetite as well, because we are, at the end of the day, an insurance company. And data and risk and privacy is central to what we do. And the second tenet is security. Is very important to us, how we protect our customer data and how that data is treated in the background. Again, the AWS team, alongside with our ProServe team, you simply understood our issues and our backend and some of the do's and the don'ts, and you brought those guardrails to the project. So again, risk and security paramount. And speed, of course, as I mentioned with speed, we just had 6 months to exit. And again, it would have been extremely difficult to bring in another hyperscaler to be able to come in and do that for us and be able to get it all off the ground within 6 months. So those were the 3 key features. And AWS, the teams at ProServe, every component, every team within AWS, you simply got our business. And that helped Sean.
Right, thanks, Neil. So what migration approach did you decide upon?
We knew that 6 months wasn't a lot of time.
Sure.
So when you look at a migration and you basically, there's a couple of things you need to consider. Do I want to just migrate? Do I want to lift and shift? And what benefit does that bring to the business? Or do I want to modernize and then move it across? But in Covermore's story, we never had the luxury of undergoing a modernization journey at the same time as a migration journey. So instead, what we decided to do is we decided on a lift and shift method, only because of time. But in doing that, what we decided was to say we are going to lift and shift probably about 70% of our workloads. The remaining workloads that simply did not or was not native to the cloud, we were going to modernize. And that was simply the approach that we were forced into, Sean. If we had the time, we would have done things differently. We would have considered a modernization program upfront for some of our core applications. But in the interest of us not having the time and having this compelling event over ourselves, we were forced to move down a lift and shift and modernize and take care of the modernization aspect immediately after the migration.
Yeah, I remember that, right? Like we sat down and we kind of had like a matrix of all your applications, right? And we were mapping it out. You know, there was those 3 tenets as you described, right? Yeah. Speed, security, and risk, right? We mapped them out. We went to your different business units and say, these are the tenets that govern the whole approach, right? It was those three tenets that governed it, right? And you know, it was very clear to me, right? We sat down and we mapped everything out, and that really kind of formed the basis, right? And it was really good that you had those tenets up front as part of that strategy, because I think it really helped get the whole team around, you know, what we were trying to achieve, right? And so, yeah, that was awesome.
Absolutely. And if we would not have been able to execute this if we didn't come together as a blended team.
Totally agree.
And that was, I think, the central enabler to this entire transformation program. The AWS teams, alongside with the Covermore teams, yep, and our other partners, we came together and we executed with speed, agility, and you know, with all the right, I suppose, if you like, diplomacy in getting this across the line.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So Neil, I know it's still kind of fairly early days post-migration, but like, do you have some data points that you could maybe share? Like, what's been some of the impacts, I guess, so far? Now that all your applications are now in AWS, could you give us a few data points of what that might look like?
Certainly, AJ. And I think from our perspective, I feel like a teenager with a Ferrari in the garage. You know, and we've got this brand new platform. We've got this, platform. Now we need to work out what do we do with this Ferrari. We've got the keys. It's sitting in our garage. It's brand spanking new. How do we get it out of the garage? What does that dial actually tell us? You know, so. We are engaging with the AWS team and with the ProServe team in particular to help us with understanding what this means for us. For instance, immediately top of mind is our data strategy. all of a sudden we have a platform now that's performant, that basically can take us from a maturity perspective from here to there. We need to sit down as a executive team and work out, how best to leverage this platform. There's no point having a Ferrari if you can't drive it, right? So that's where we are. So from a data strategy, we want to execute a data strategy. That's number one. Yeah. And the second part of it is we want to be able to see how, from an innovation perspective, how do we scale? How do we use this? This is top of mind for our executives. We've invested in a brand new platform. How can we now use this platform to pivot to a customer benefit? How can we use this platform to be able to bring to market products and services that we previously couldn't even imagine? And the scale and the speed to which we basically can, previously if it took us, let's say 4 months to go to market with a product, we know for a fact now with this platform, with the performant platform that we have, we can go to market within weeks rather than months. But how do we do that? That's the magic that we're trying to unpack and we're trying to basically work through. So that's the second part of it, the scale, and from a scale perspective as well, that's the other thing is, we now have this platform that we can scale very rapidly in any geography we wanted to, be it LATAM, be it EMEA, etc. It's a very interesting prospect for us as a business.
Could you talk a little bit about the operating model? Because as I know as part of the migration, we're now using AWS managed services as well. Could you maybe expand upon that, like how that's helped you?
100%. And as you know, at least the team that I had, we were focused fully on an on-prem servicing, an on-prem model. And the skills, the capability, and the mindset, especially that comes with it, is very different to the mindset that you need to move to when you're operating within the cloud. To be able to get there, I have to say that the ProServe team, the TAM, they basically help us get there. They are the building blocks or the bridges, if you like, that set the guardrails, that set the parameters, and help us safely to get there. And that's invaluable for a company like Covermore undertaking a journey, or for any company for that matter of fact, wanting to undertake that journey. We do need our partner to be able to come in and help us, just like training wheels on a kid's bike, right? Mm-hmm. We need these training wheels until we know for a fact that we are that we can manage the environments on our own, etc.
Yep.
So the ProServe team, the TAM, all of the other services that AWS offer, we are leveraging all of these to be able to get us to that end state.
And you talked a little bit about disaster recovery, of how you were doing it slightly on-prem. Could you maybe talk about some of the benefits that you kind of now are seeing now that you've moved all your applications into the cloud? Could you expand a little bit about the disaster recovery or your BCP and how that's kind of expanded a bit more?
Absolutely, and if our chief risk officer was here, he'd say that it would be a really robust conversation. But straight away, we're starting to see the benefits, because previously we had 2 data centers. For instance, in APAC, we had GSU and we had Bockham Hills, and if one would go down, we would cut over to the other. Mm-hmm. It's again, by moving to the cloud, we now have AZs, and the amount of pressure that's taken off the team. You can't even literally quantify, if you like, because all of a sudden our BCP position and our DR positioning has jumped 4-fold, 5-fold, because we know for a fact that if one AZ goes down, immediately the other AZ fires up. It's just the nature of the platform. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I can sleep better at night knowing that I'm not going to get a call at 2 a.m. in the morning saying that a couple of our pizza boxes are down, for instance.
What would you say would be some of the key takeaways? And if you could give some advice to people, starting in their journey, what would you say it would be some of the lessons learned, key takeaways?
Apart from the compelling event, if you're faced with a gun to your head, apart from that, if we were to do this as per script, if you like, what the first thing I believe the key takeaways would be is you need to sit down. I'd highly recommend that the team actually sits down with the executive team and gets that education piece up front. That cloud education piece, working with the ELT, is absolutely gold. It's priceless. understanding where your ELT is and where your ELT needs to be at for this transformation to work is extremely critical. Because that by itself, it starts to remove the blockers that gets presented tactically in your journey. It's very important it's very important that if you're considering a blended team, you need to think about a blended team tactically for your day-to-day operations and activities, but also strategically.
There's so many different stakeholders in that journey, right? I mean, I remember speaking to, we had to kind of have different viewpoints for the CFO, different points for the head of architecture, different points for the CIO, different points for yourself, right? And everyone had a different kind of view or view of that journey as well. Could you maybe talk about, how you approached some of those conversations and some of the things that you would recommend other people do as well?
One thing coming into this transformation that was top of mind is every single stakeholder had their own lens. As you mentioned, AJ, the CFO has a financial lens to this, from a cost perspective. What's this going to cost?
Yep.
What's this going to cost me?
Yep.
Or from a CEO's perspective, what does this mean? This to a CEO, this is a cost base, right? It's, technology itself is a cost, but having an understanding and having the mindfulness of how to engage with your stakeholders. And when you talk to a developer, again, totally different mindset.
Yep.
Where he's coming from is basically he needs to get these workloads out of the data center into the, so he's focused on a very different lens to when you're sitting in front of your, say, your chief risk officer. Again, very different lens. Bringing all of these stakeholders together on your journey in the mindfulness that this is a transformation program, and leveraging your partners, your key partners to help. I think that's very understated, and it's a very powerful thing, is to get your partners to help you on this journey,
Yep.
to be able to get that message across and be able to, tick all those boxes of the various lenses that we're trying to satisfy.
Yes,
I think that is pivotal to a transformation.
Yeah, agree.
Neil, one of the things that I think made this project really successful was your approach to governance and communication. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Sean. Governance cadence is I'm very passionate about the governance and the cadence. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done, they say. So right up front, the very first deck that was presented to the ELT talked about, there were a good 4 slides that talked about, how are we going to run this transformation program? What's the governance going to look like? What's the cadence going to look like? And who's going to be in those meetings and how are we going to execute it was very important. For instance, Sean, you'd know this very well. Every morning at 8:30, we'd have a stand-up, and we'd have all the key stakeholders in that stand-up. And we had AWS, we had all of our AWS partners in that stand-up, exactly working out where we are today, what are the challenges, what are the blockers, and how are we going to unblock that. And that was a daily event, religiously, non-stop every day. And then you had your ad hoc cadences and whatnot, and that fed into your if you like, into your ELT, the message going up as well. So the flow between your tactical teams and your strategic teams, the information flow,
Totally.
becomes very important to be able to move the dial forward progressively and to solve those problems in an agile manner. So at the end of the day, it's how you execute your agile methodology in this transformation program that makes a difference as well.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, awesome.
This session is now coming to an end. Thank you, Neil, AJ, and Sean, for sharing your insights and learnings from how to run a successful transformation program. Some of the key takeaways and top tips that we've picked up is that there needs to be top-down sponsorship from the ELT, the executive LT, to develop their cloud skills and uplift them, and that you've got buy-in from all levels of the business. So it's a mindset change. You've got the blended teams all working together in cross-collaboration. The second thing that we hit on was we need both technology as well as the people, leadership, and a strong purpose, as well as a connection back to end customers for a successful transformation. And lastly, just to your point, and I loved your analogy of now that we've got a Ferrari and what to do next with it. So the point of technology is not just cost reduction, it's actually an enabler for the future digital transformation, and it will help unlock innovation and help drive new capability and revenue streams. I'm excited to hear about Covermore's next phase of your transformation journey, with your move from rapid migration to focus on data strategy, app modernization, and also continue continually optimizing and your cloud education, and this is going to drive innovation and give you the keys to the car on what to do next. Thank you, Neil, for spending the time to join us on this fireside chat and sharing your valuable key takeaways and learnings for a successful transformation program. I'm truly inspired by what you've achieved at Covermore, and as a leader and executive sponsor, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me on this panel here. It's been a wonderful experience, and I have to say that without the team, without the AWS team behind this transformation, it would have made this absolutely impossible. So thank you very much, and my sincere thanks and gratitude to the team for leaning in and helping in every possible way. So much appreciated, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Neil.
So we've just heard from Neil on how Covermore recently shifted all of their on-prem data centers into AWS. Now, I'll be diving a little deeper into some of the details of that migration and how we approached migrating Covermore's core insurance platform into AWS. So at our last ANZ Summit, you heard from our Chief Technologist, Simon Elisha, who had a great quote that I love. He said, "Be stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the approach." This was exactly the approach that we took with Covermore's core insurance platform. Part of the vision we had for this application came back to the 3 tenets that Neil described during our fireside chat. The first one was speed. We had less than 6 months to move this application into AWS. The second one was risk. This was their core insurance platform. It's absolutely critical to Covermore's day-to-day operations. This is literally their crown jewels of their operations. We had to nail resilience. We had to ensure that this platform was designed with as much high availability and resilience as possible. And lastly, as this was an insurance platform, of course, it contained PII data. We knew we had to implement the most secure platform possible by implementing things like MFA, least privileged access, perimeter protection, and of course, encryption everywhere, just to name a couple of the things that we did. And really the second part of the vision that we had for this platform, that yes, while we were largely lifting and shifting this platform into AWS, we really wanted to design it in a way that would allow Covermore to iteratively modernize their components as their journey onto the cloud matured. So what was the end result? What was the end result of this whole exercise? Well, this platform was a complex platform built in-house over the last few decades. It contained 49 different applications, over 40 terabits of data, hundreds of external interfaces, and multiple enterprise frameworks and databases. All of this is running on on-prem hardware that was already struggling to keep up with business demand. Post the migration into AWS, Covermore now have a secure, resilient platform that was migrated well before the close of their data centers. Did we have to make some pivots and adjustments to the architecture along the way? You bet we did, right? But we always stayed true to our vision of speed, security, and reduced risk, built on an architecture that would allow Covermore to continually modernize. Remember, be stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the execution. Thanks for your time.
Hi, I am Vikas Awasthi, Principal Architect at AWS Professional Services. I specialize in large-scale data center migrations and application modernization programs. I'm very happy to share how we helped our client Covermore to exit their data center at speed using prescribed AWS migration services and patterns.
Covermore had a compelling event and had to exit the data center in 6 months. Using our partner and the Covermore core migration team, we conducted workshops with the business and technical SMEs to develop workload-specific migration treatments. We also designed the platform using AWS Well Architecture Framework to enable Covermore to iteratively modernize components as it progressed its cloud adoption journey.
As we move towards application modernization and serverless architectures, the level of initial effort increases and the business value increases as well. However, the operational responsibilities decrease. It is therefore important to consider the compelling events, business and technical drivers to develop the cloud adoption roadmap for an enterprise. To fast-track Covermore's cloud migration, we adopted the prescribed AWS migration patterns, security controls, and services to establish a secure and resilient platform. We leveraged AWS Managed Services or AMS to manage backups, patching and monitoring. Doing so has given CoverMore's operational staff more than 20% extra time through the week to manage their strategic initiatives. To migrate CoverMore data center, we used the AWS migration services as well as AWS migration and modernization framework. This framework can be adopted for hundreds of workloads to exit the data center. It can be used for a single application or a group of applications. The framework comprises of 3 phases: assess, mobilize, and migrate or modernize. The assess phase is used to understand the workloads and create a case for change. This is often triggered by deploying discovery tools in the current state environment and then developing a business case. The mobilize phase helps to build business, technical, and operational readiness and executing pilot migrations to prove patterns as well as the ability to scale further. The detailed discovery and learning from pilot migrations are used to develop detailed migration plans or wave plans. Final migrate and modernize phase executes the migration plans by iterating through the waves and then continuing to optimize and streamline the cloud operations. Migration waves typically span 4 to 8 weeks. For CoverMore, we planned 6 waves, each containing 1 or more migration events. In wave planning, group of application or infrastructure components were identified that have technical or non-technical dependencies. These dependencies, if not resolved, lead us to club the applications or infrastructure into a group, and this group is migrated together. The wave contains activities like AWS infrastructure setup, such as landing zone, security and operations, migration tooling, and migration activities such as data replication, cutover planning, cutover testing, and post-migration support. As the CoverMore migration program moved forward and as more and more waves were migrated, we were able to evolve the migration wave plan, and we based it on the lessons learned as well as the business priorities. We were able to gain efficiencies and accelerate the migration by leveraging automation and the testing scripts and artifacts that we had developed in the prior waves. To fast track the migration of business critical workloads and to reduce the associated risks with such large migrations, we leveraged AWS Migration Services or MGN. AWS MGN is a highly automated service. It specializes for rehost solutions, and it played a key role in CoverMore's data center migration. With AWS MGN, there is no need to change applications, application architectures, or the migrated servers. The same process is used for all the applications, databases, and operating systems, whether the source server is virtualized, is hosted in a physical server, or cloud-based. This allowed us to avoid expensive manual work and instead focus on developing automation scripts and to execute technical and non-technical business verification tests. The MGN service automates the entire workflow from server conversion to server provisioning. All information is replicated directly from source servers to the destination servers. The entire data is encrypted both at rest as well as in transit. By using MGN features and MGN migration workflows, we were able to test the workloads and develop detailed run sheets prior to migration. We developed CloudFormation templates or CFNs to provision the servers, as well as we leveraged AMS services or AWS Accelerate services to fast-track the onboarding and management of migration servers. AWS Managed Services, or AMS, has helped CoverMore to onboard fast and seamlessly into the service. AWS Managed Services provide a broad set of capabilities. These include safety mechanisms by maintaining a library of AWS config rules to evaluate all the accounts comply with industry standards for security and operational integrity, proactive incident detection, automated resource tagging and instance configuration, backup and restoration, as well as patching by applying updates to the supported operating systems in the agreed maintenance windows. Using AMS to manage backups, patching and monitoring has enabled CoverMore's operating staff more than 20% extra time weekly to focus on more strategic priorities. We were able to migrate CoverMore data center at speed. The migrated workloads are now hosted on secure and reliable AWS platform and are being used by CoverMore to drive its modernization journey forward.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you've picked up some valuable insights for your own migration journey and have an understanding of how ProServe and AMS can help with its acceleration. To find out more, please visit the AWS website and contact us if we can be of any help to you in your migration journey.